Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Artcasters number 387, and we have a returning guest we'll get to in a minute, but we're going to do what we always do and go around the room and introduce ourselves. So let's start out with Josh.
Hi, yeah, I'm Joshua Kemble, and you can find me at joshuakemble.com. And what I really want to promote is on September 16th, you guys were just talking about this. I just thought it was the coolest thing, so I just want to promote this for you guys. Josh, it's me from the future. Whatever you do, do not talk about Scott and Eric's appearance at Surprise Comics on September 16th. It'll destroy the universe. It'll be so epic. The lead creator of the Hadron Collider is a big comics fan. He's going to go to Surprise Comics, and he's going to be so blown away by the quality of Eric and Scott's artwork that the universe will end. I don't know, man. I think we're just going to promote their appearance at Surprise Comics.
Yeah,
that was weird.
I mean, that's the whole reason why we wanted to get Eric on and everything to promote this and talk about traditional comics and everything. So I guess we're going to have to risk the fate of the universe.
Yeah, stay tuned. And
oh no!
Just kidding.
Yeah. Now the order's a little different, but we're still going to go around the room and we'll kind of switch back. So
yeah, and if you guys haven't yet, hit like. Come on, we just did high level special effects for you guys. Hit that like button.
So now we're going to go counterclockwise according to what I'm seeing. So I'm Scott with Circworks Art Labs. You can find my stuff at circworks.com. Where you will find my comic book, Young and the Dead. It's a kids versus zombie adventure story. I've got 5 issues of that available right now. Also, I have tons of digital tools that'll help you make comics faster and more efficiently. Just go there and check all that stuff out. Also, go to my YouTube channel where I'm doing something new, where I'm taking vintage and classic, items, novelties, collectibles from the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and I'm kind of examining them, reverse engineering them, and recreating them, but adding a unique spin to them. So if that sounds interesting, check that out on my YouTube channel. Also, I have the Making Comics 101, which is the most comprehensive course for free on making comics you're going to find anywhere. So definitely check all that stuff out. And like I mentioned, and Eric will mention when we get to him too, probably, we both of us have an appearance coming up on the 16th at Surprise Comics locally. Where it's actually Batman Day. So there, at comic, I think because of my understanding is because Free Comic Book Day is such a success. Now they're trying to find any reason to do some kind of special event to bring people in the comic stores. But they've been doing Batman Day for a few years now. So pretty cool event. I'm not sure what the significance of the date, because a lot of times it has something to do with something having to do with Batman's history. I don't know, but again, it's on the 16th, and we'll be there. We'll be there doing sketches and commissions and all that kind of stuff. So
minds will be blown, universes will be destroyed.
So if you happen to be local to Arizona, come out to Surprise and see us both. You gotta get there early if you want to see Eric, though, because I think he's going to only be there till like 1 o'clock or something. I'll be there all day. All right, because he's very in demand. All right, so Corey, what about you?
You can find my stuff at CoreyKerr.com and sign up for the newsletter, CoreyKerr.com/email. I'm going to do a little breakdown of that canoe trip that I went on, which is fun. We paddled for about 4 days, 20-something miles, and so you can make sure you don't miss out on that. And I'm probably going to be ending or pausing Esoteric Crumble Flux and replacing it with something yet to be announced. So if you're interested in that stuff, check out the newsletter there.
I was wondering what that was going to happen, because you've been doing that one for a little while, longer than usually work on a project. So
yeah, I think it's reached a natural conclusion. So. And that natural conclusion is I'm sick of it and I want to do something else.
That's typically the MO, Corey's MO, yeah. And not too far off from mine either. You switch around. But. All right, so finally on to our guest, Eric Henson, who we've had on the show before. Like I said, he's local to pretty much the same city where I live and everything. And like I said, we'll be doing another one on the 16th at our local comic shop, Surprise Comics. But Gary, Eric, I always said that. So Eric is a very talented illustrator, and one of the unique things that that's unique to Eric is one, that he's kind of found that niche that so many comic book artists would love to have, just doing covers, which, I mean, that's the dreams of so many comic artists. But he also does them pretty much traditionally, to the fact that every once in a while he'll call me up and he'll be like, "Hey, I need you to help me out with doing something digital or design something around one of my covers or something like that." Because he seriously, and he says, "Oh, I'm just a caveman. I don't know how to do any of this digital stuff." But not to his detriment, because he does amazing work with traditional media. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that. But how's it going, Eric?
That's pretty good. Pretty good. Staying busy, like you mentioned, and not learning anything new technologically. Just leaning on those old skills that I'm trying to hone.
Well, you're doing an awesome job of it. I mean, and I'm always, I mean, and being in such close proximity to you when we do these shows and stuff, and just seeing what you're creating firsthand, and like looking at some of your original stuff, it's just, it's kind of mind blowing. So and because of that, you're just, like I said, you're doing what so many artists would love to do, and just because you have done sequential stuff. I don't want to say that you have, because you've got your series Eden and a couple other projects, but yeah. I think correct me if I'm wrong, but you probably just happy to stick with doing covers, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I mean, like any artist in this industry, you have to break your teeth on doing sequentials first. You have to break in and start out doing that, and I did that. I think probably some of the first sequential work that I did was at Image on a book called The Perhapanauts with Todd DeZago and Craig Rousseau. And then I moved on to doing like little stints here and there. I was doing backups in some books. It's a now defunct company, two of them actually. I did stuff at Ape Entertainment. I don't know if you guys remember Ape.
And the show Ape, does it have to do with like the alternative comic press, or is it something else?
Maybe. I don't know. They said you're hired, and I said okay. I didn't know it much more. And then a couple of other companies. Oddly, most of them are out of business now. Like one of the founders passed away recently of one of them. So, and then I did a lot of work for like character design for TV shows and things kind of behind the scenes. Yeah, just a lot of things in working in this industry that, maybe 40% of things that I worked on actually came to fruition. Right. Because there's so much involved with the budget. Mm-hmm. And I've done a lot of like storyboarding for independent movies and a lot of that has to do with producers and stuff. But you do the work, you get paid, and a lot of times you don't get to see it come to fruition. But yes, I did start sequentially and doing storyboarding for film, and then eventually I did get into doing covers, which I thought I'd never get a chance to get to do that. I used to see people do like just retailer variants and things like that for like Ninja Turtles, and just feel like, man, why can't you just get sick one day and throw me a bone and throw my name to an editor? Because I just want to have a chance to draw a character that people recognize. Well, I love now. Don't get me wrong. I get the most satisfaction from doing creative run.
Yeah.
I don't really get anything other than the cool factor of I got to draw something that I grew up watching and is published.
Yeah.
But I don't get a lot of creative satisfaction from certain IPs. It's just really fun to do, and honestly, it gets more people's eyeballs on the work that you spend hours doing.
Yep.
Which in turn helps what you love to do independently.
Yeah, and the thing that it's funny that you said that because I know there's a few IPs that you worked on that you weren't really all that familiar with. I don't know if Harry Potter was one of them, but there were a couple that you said, yeah, I don't know much about this one, but it's still like you still knock it out of the park. It's just like,
well, thanks. That's surprisingly a lot of them. I don't know much about some of them early on. If they're like anime and things like that, then I'm not in that world so much, just very vaguely. So I'll have to ask my kids You know, what characters do I put on this poster or things like that. But I mean, the only series. Let's see. I'm trying to think of one that I didn't have any clue. No, I mean, most of the stuff I kind of knew about, or it was like new and upcoming stuff, like that hadn't been out, like Undiscovered Country and Noctera and that stuff at Image. Nobody knew what that was, so I didn't feel left out. But I will say, at conventions and signings, and you know this too, you get some of the strangest requests of things you have never heard of.
Yeah.
And probably never want to hear of again after you finish drawing it. No.
A lot of strange guys asking for Power Girl
we've
drawings.
We've got some companies that come in and ask for some crazy stuff, and it's a challenge. It's fun, but sometimes it's just like, really? What?
Yeah. Yeah, I had somebody ask me for, I mean, they weren't from here. I think they were from France. And the French comics have a whole nother cast of, really popular characters, and I don't know them, but they expected me to. And I was like, you have to give me reference. And they're like, no, I don't have reference. Just draw her now. It's like, I can't. I'll do my best.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I'm not trying to do any commissions without some sort of reference. So.
Yeah. Honestly, it would be cool to see you rock a Tintin, though, for sure, Eric.
Yeah, I have heard of that. I understood that reference. Yeah. I got to do one for, I don't know if you guys remember the show Daria. That was a
yeah.
came up and asked me to do a Daria. And that was
that's awesome.
The funniest thing in Daria was the news program, which kind of reminds me of like a Corey Kerr joke where they had an ongoing news program, Six Ad World. Yeah.
Yeah. They sell those T-shirts. I was going to get one that says that has a little eyeball in it. Yeah.
So Eric, you were talking about how you used to admire people who got to work on like Ninja Turtles. Yeah. So how many will you, by maybe another month or so, how many Ninja Turtles covers will you have worked on?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I think 7 at this point, and then there should be 4 or 5 more in the next. Well, I think the last Ronin. I count the last Ronin because it is.
No, it's definitely. I would say.
Yeah, and so those are going to be bi-monthly. So in the next quarter, it'll be 4 more at least.
Awesome.
Hopefully, if I don't mess.
So you're doing one for basically every issue then.
Yes.
For last Ronin.
Everything. Yeah, it depends on how it sells, but yeah, definitely.
And is that all through surprise, or you got other companies?
Mostly through surprise. There are 2 other. Forgive me, I don't even know. They're not retailers like a brick and mortar store, but they do a lot of online selling, and they have a lot of variant covers. So they have asked me to do one as well, and then. And I guess, they also, back when the Usagi Yojimbo pair teamed up with TMNT, they were a company that asked me to do one as well. I didn't end up doing it, but this is kind of me making up for not doing that last one.
Yeah, so let's kind of break down sort of the business model. And obviously, you guys keep in mind that Eric is like a super, super talented artist. And I get by. So, I mean, I'm just... talking about this doesn't mean you can. Not everyone's going to be able to jump in. He's kind of paid his dues and stuff. But so I mean, previous to the variant covers, I mean, it would have been really difficult for somebody to come in and just do covers. But now that whole market has opened such a new way to do covers. But then and that introduces you to, because they have to get approved by the publisher. So that introduces, the publisher sees it, and then the publisher probably will start contacting you directly. I know you've done stuff for Chaos Comics, which are also local and everything. But so there's that aspect of it. Because you're all, and we'll get into this too, because that's kind of the nature of this episode. But because you do everything traditionally, I mean, and sometimes you'll have a colorist do the color and everything, but if you do the color, you do it all with marker and everything, and you can't tell it's marker. It looks like it's painted. Just look at the thumbnail to this video, and definitely check out Eric stuff at his website. I think we put a link in the description for that. But so there's that aspect, but then there's also a lot of the other thing you do is the remarks and stuff.
Mhm.
And you even do, like, when you design a cover, and this is something to think about, which is really clever on your part, is typically a lot of times when you design a cover, you'll leave a little space, or you'll kind of plan it so there is a place where you can put a remark, right? Yeah, which is really cool. And it's inconspicuous. It doesn't look like it's just like, if you're not getting a remark, it doesn't look like it's blank. It looks, you find a way to make it work, which is really cool. So I mean, there's just so many different ways that as a business that you can do this. If you can get into it, like get in touch. Not every local comic book store does this, but if they are doing their exclusive variant covers, if you can get on with your local comic book store, do variant covers, and then they have you in and you do the remarks and all that stuff. And you've even done like remarks on like actual, like the toys and stuff.
Yeah,
so I've seen
yeah.
you do,
People
like,
love those
toys and stuff.
Yeah, a lot of once you do a cover for a publisher, they own the rights to that art because it's not your character, and so they'll use it for like toy packaging, and so people do come up with like, so when the last Ronin came out, my cover along with the main cover, which was done by the two brothers, the Escorza brothers, that did the actual interior, but then also Ben Bishop, who's kind of the flagship interior artist. He does a lot of the covers too. It's basically our three covers and cover work that goes on almost all the toys that the last Ronin has on the market. So like my cover, it was originally designed just for a retailer's cover, but IDW, Nickelodeon, they've used it for the PCS, which is sold by Sideshow, those big premium format figures.
Yeah.
Playmates Toys uses it as the box art. Funko, like all the Ronin Funko Pops have my cover like down on the bottom.
So rad.
So if you think about it, thanks. So if you think about it, like, yes, at the same time that you're designing it for the cover, also think about the other applications it could have, and will that translate to like packaging? Will it translate to whatever else they want to use it for licensing?
Are you pricing that accordingly, or do you get paid extra? Like, typically when you're supposed to, when you price illustration, you're supposed to price it based on what different products it's going to be on and things like that. Do you take that into consideration, or do they pay you extra if they're going to use it in different areas, different products?
No, they don't pay. Well, so the way it works with like the Turtles are co-owned. Now, IDW owns the publishing rights. Nickelodeon owns part of the rights. There's another company I can't recall that also has their hand in the pot. So no, they don't. I don't know if I'm supposed to talk about like their internal.
Okay. Yeah.
But what they do is when you do the art for them, they mail you something, and when you accept that envelope, and you basically agree to let them use it however they wish. They don't always even know what they're going to use it for.
Right.
So no, they don't come back and tell you. I have no clue what my art is on until someone contacts me and goes, "Hey, did you look at the the Marvel Select figure for Venom? I think this is your art." And they'll send it to me, and I'll be like, "Sure enough." They don't pay you any extra. They don't tell you anything. They don't have to. They pay for the right to use that art on whatever they want and make money off of it. So
they just own it wholesale, which makes sense. That's kind of like equivalent to like doing in-house work or something,
Yeah. But they're I mean, they've been pretty nice, like as far as
do they send you product?
No, they don't.
You ask for it?
But that's the thing. See, if you email them and ask, I think they seem like they'd be open to do it. I just haven't done it yet. It's not because I'm lazy. Well, yeah, it is. I just haven't done it. No, but I enjoy doing it regardless. Like, I don't know what they're going to use it for, but it's fun. And so more people come up to you because they've seen the art in more places. Yeah. And so, that's always an interesting.
Yeah, but I like the good thing is if your artwork is on that product, then like you said, you get people coming up to you, do a remark, and then you can
Yeah.
charge for the remark. So there's
Yeah.
other ways to do it, and that's kind of like the whole, for better or for worse, that's kind of like the whole comic industry, because even though, I mean, the comics themselves don't pay a lot, but if you can build a name for yourself, you can make money like at conventions and stuff, either
Yeah.
doing sketches or commissions or whatever,
Right.
because you've created that name. And a lot of times the only way to create that name is by doing stuff for the comic companies, even though they don't pay a whole lot.
Right. No, the actual work itself, if you, I mean, typically won't pay you as much as all the things that the work itself can bring
Right.
you. Like, yes, conventions, and this ties into working physically versus digitally. Once I've done that work for that company, yes, I send them. They're paying you for the rights to that digital artwork to reprint it, but I still own the physical copy, and they
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
bother you for it, and I can go back and sell that artwork to a collector. So I'm making money twice off one drawing, which essentially you want to maximize the passive income as much as possible. Then if you make prints of it, if that publisher allows prints,
That's what I
sometimes
was
they
gonna
actually
ask.
send you prints with
Okay.
their stamp on the bottom, and they'll
Mhm.
authorize you so many so that you're not mass producing, right? They will give that as just along with the comps as well, so you can sell it.
It's
Uh,
kind of
and
like
and
e-copies in like the poster industry, kind of sounds like,
yeah,
where they send you
well,
the
I
advance.
haven't. Yeah, yeah, it is. It's very similar. And they understand it because you are free advertising. And then if you put in the work and happen to be fortunate enough to work for the right people, like another way you can make money at cons, so not just the remarks and the sketches like you mentioned, but conventions pay, like I get an appearance fee typically to just to go, like
Yeah.
to show up. And so if you could those shows that have the budget to do that, those are a great way. You haven't sketched anything and you're already in the black because you're not paying for flights, you're not paying for a table, you're not paying for a hotel, and they're giving you an appearance fee. So you start out in the black already. And I know that's not where people are going to start out. I still have no clue why. Some shows, maybe some shows don't have like the really solid guests, and they have more budget than they have guests. Or what I think is going on, like particularly right now, is say for instance there's a hot commodity or a hot product like Ronin. Ronin's making, Turtles have always made money, but not the kind of money they're making now. Ronin is making a lot of money. There's a video game getting ready to come out. So
Yeah.
promoters and agents look for who has done anything on that title
Yeah.
and what could probably bring some customers and bring some fans in. And
Yeah.
they're willing to pay for that. So it's hard to get on those properties. But it's just whatever work you do get, do it to the best of your ability, because you
Yeah.
never know how these companies are. I got a phone call from a guy at Disney. I don't know how they even have my, I have no clue. Come to find out, it's something I had done because I was on a list at Nickelodeon. And I don't know if they were, the two guys were friends or whatever. That's how I got to do Gargoyles, was because all the artists that they wanted to do a cover for Gargoyles, at the last minute, I think one of the artists just bailed out. Oh no,
Yep.
he was too busy. It was Raymond Gay, very in demand artist. Raymond's good, but I was next on that list, but not from Disney, but from I think Nickelodeon. So they had reached out and said, "Hey, do you guys have anybody?" So just do the work that you do get. And here, to be fair, covers are not usually given to people like me or lower level comic artists that haven't done Batman. So notoriety for covers is what those people are looking for. The name on the cover sells the cover. But I got really tired of that model, and that's one of the reasons I did my own book, because no one could tell me I can't do my own cover. So I did my
Yeah.
own covers, obviously, to my own books. But because they were done to a certain standard, it gave a sampling of what a cover for the By Me looks like.
Yeah.
But I would have never gotten that opportunity waiting for someone to give me permission to do their cover for their IP. It just
Yeah.
wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, and I mean you can do that also with fan art. I mean, there's so many fan artists that if they've got something original or something different that stands out. I mean, I've heard a lot of stories where people do fan art that actually puts them in front of the people that actually own the properties, and they
Yeah.
hire them to do that. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't discount. I mean, yeah, you've not been on a Batman or anything like that. But the thing is, you're showing that it's possible that there's other routes, because the whole
Right.
idea, that you always hear that story, like, how do you break into the comic business? Well, if I told you, they've already closed that door. If somebody's done it, the second person can't do it the same way. So
Yeah.
I mean, what I'm saying is there are other ways to break into doing covers, and the way you've done it is definitely one of those ways. And I think it is with skill and with talent and all that. If you're good enough, I think that's an avenue other people can take if they look into it, because there's a lot of people. Like we've got a guy that watches some of our stuff and everything. He's kind of in the community, Squashy, he does a lot of just sketch covers and stuff like that. And he's a lot of people doing commissions. I don't know if he's ever done any like official variant covers or anything like that, but he gets stuff doing that. So there's different ways to kind of go about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the answer is in the question. When people say, how do you break into comics? Emphasis on the break part.
Yeah.
You force your way in there and make something.
Yeah.
Yep. And I love
the
the suggestion you were making too, Eric, of like, whatever you do it to the best of your ability, because you never know. And I mean, like, my whole career, I feel like that's been exactly the case, where weird things will lead to other weird things, and a lot of it just has to do with things that you might have even done at a loss initially, but just kind of poured your heart into, and then like that gets around and like ends up leading to more work and stuff like that. So I think that's great advice. And also, yeah, I love the idea of like, if you're gonna get into art and you're waiting for somebody to give you permission, you're gonna be waiting for a long time. Like, yeah, I love that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So let's let's talk about a little bit more about the fact that pretty much everything you do is traditional. You don't do anything digitally, and even though even though I obviously started traditional, but once I kind of stuck with it long enough to figure out the programs and stuff and started doing it, now I'm to the point where I could do it so much faster digitally.
Right.
And so it's kind of taken me away from that a little bit. So to some points when I go to a show, I feel like when I go to Surprise, I'm going to be a little rusty because I haven't done much on paper for a little while. So I feel like maybe I should need to start doing some more original stuff just to brush up. But there's so many benefits to doing things traditionally, even though it might take a little more time, but and one of those is like the original artwork, like you talked about. So, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it doesn't seem like you have any aspirations or any desire to start doing things digitally, that you're perfectly happy doing the things the way you're doing it now.
I used to have a lot of aspirations. The Wacom tablets and all that was very enticing for me to learn, like Adobe Illustrator or Photoshop. And I wanted someone to teach me. And this is way before now. But when that was starting to get really popular, I did want to learn, because I saw the benefits, the speed, the way you can correct things, working with perspective, being able to set things automatically that you don't have to, keep redoing by hand over and over again. I saw the benefit of it, and I looked at it and just got so intimidated. I'll be honest. I was just intimidated by the learning curve, learning layers and all that stuff. It just seemed like a foreign language to me, that I was just too afraid to learn. And so I kept putting it off, like, I'm not going to learn right now. I'm going to keep working on this and working on this. So it translates to working digitally. Well, what happened is I kept hearing that the next wave is digital. Everybody wants digital. And I just tried to ignore it, even though I was very afraid that was true. And so I said to myself, I'll just put it off. I'll learn. And the truth is, so much work is digital now. So much is going digital now. In fact, I had no idea until the other night. I was talking to the inker for the Last Ronin Last Ronin 2 cover that I'm doing now. He's inking it as we speak, and we were joking about there not being very many inkers left, traditional inkers who don't ink digitally. And I joked with him. I said, there are probably plenty of you guys. He said, I honestly can guarantee you from doing he does shows year round. He sees everybody. He said, I guarantee you there are less than 20 individuals left that still actively ink comics. He said, think about it. Your Scott Williamses, all the people who are, inking Jim Lee, he said, you know what they're doing right now? It's pencils. Think about it. They're drawing because there's just not, unless you're tethered to a really bankable penciler, there's not a whole lot going around. And I didn't know that it was that small. I didn't know the numbers were that small. I still find it kind of hard to believe because there's a lot more traditional pencilers than that. But he does know the business. It is his business to know. And he said there are less than 20 remaining. And so I think that maybe this generation of guys and ladies and non-binary people that are doing comic art now, traditionally, I'm not saying that we'll go the way of the dinosaur, but I think maybe in a generation or two, it will be far, far less common. I think it'll be a rarity to see, which makes me wonder what will happen to the expectations of publishers, the expectations of editors. I cannot tell you how many times an editor has asked me to make a revision to something. And I've told them, look, this is going to take me a day or two to fix. And they really don't understand that delay because they're so used to a person being able to go in and have a shortcut to fix that. Not that they're not doing the work. It's just that they can make those changes and email them that change so quickly. Whereas, understand, I have to erase and redraw that, rescan it, and I do digitally erase little pencil shavings and stuff. I had to clean it back up, crop it, and that doesn't sound like a lot of work, but it does take an extra 30, 40 minutes, and they want it now. And I don't think and then when you tell them, hey, I work traditionally, they're surprised.
Yeah.
I'm like, you thought that everything I was giving you was digital. And it's not that the work is so good and tight they think it's digital. I think a lot of, especially the younger editors who have started off doing it in this age, just don't know really the difference they don't know the process. They just know this is what I get. They know the end result and don't know how much goes into it, especially when they're asking for changes to line art after it's been traditionally inked. And I have to explain, look, that's not that simple to fix. Yes, we can go back and white it out, but it's gonna take a little bit more time. So I think that's definitely one of the hurdles of working traditionally, especially if you're doing licensing work, because the turnover rate, the request rate of changes for licensing work, and those of you that don't know who are watching, licensing work is t-shirts, underwear, other stuff that these characters appear on. You get this packet, which is a style guide. They email you and they say, hey, we need Batman to look this way. And you'll send it to them and they will say, that looks close to the style, but it's too aggressive. And our market is 3 and 4 year olds. So make it more friendly, widen the. So you'll make 10 or 12 changes. And then the next time you send it, a different editor will look at it and tell you to change it back. So there are advantages to being able to go in and make those alterations fairly quickly that I just never learned. And no, I don't have a desire to answer your question. Long answer. I don't have a desire to learn it, but it's not because I don't see the advantages of it. I've just kind of given up. I've just kind of given up on myself being able to learn it or being all that interested in learning it. And I've just fallen in love with the sound of that graphite on the paper and the sound of that marker, script. I love it. And I know you can probably duplicate that on a tablet, but I do enjoy it. I love it. I love the art form. And I think it's a caveat on that. I didn't intend to come into the comic business. I learned. I was for 9 years. I was trained traditionally doing oil paintings and things like that.
Yeah.
So there was no talk of a shortcut to do that because it's not based on publishing deadlines. And I think the expediency of the business, that's what drives the relevance of that format. More so when you're talking the fine art world and gallery showings, there is no interest in going in that direction. That's not something that is even on the table to change on a huge scale. I think back when I did
Yeah.
it. So there was no training. I trained in a lot of things. I can go in a dark room and mix chemicals to develop an old school photograph, but they never
Yep.
taught me how to use Photoshop or anything like that. It just was not it wasn't even in the conversation. So
And
when
that's
I
something I
decided,
don't miss traditional on is just because of the smell of developer fluid. I don't miss that.
we used to use pinhole cameras. I had to build a pinhole camera the
Hmm.
old school way with the little
Yep.
flap and the little, and we worked with altering photographs, but it wasn't digital. We had to hand color, black and
Hmm.
white exposures and things like that. So yeah, doing that, I feel very confident in almost anything physical. Even show me a pottery wheel, I'll throw a pot. I don't care. It'll probably explode in the kiln like 5 times. But I'm very confident with working with my own hands. But when it gets to using those hands to operate a mouse to draw with or a Wacom tablet with a pen, I'm just honestly intimidated to try.
Well, here's the thing, and I think this is just a theory, but I think it may work to your benefit because one of the reasons why I kind of switched what I was doing on YouTube to kind of more of a maker channel, like hands-on actually creating things by hand and everything, is because now with AI on the scene and that things can generate art like that, there I think people are going to gravitate more to the actual process because no one cares to watch a computer generate art. The art may be really cool when it's done. You may look at it and say, "Wow, that's cool. A computer did that." But they're not going to care about watching that happen. And I
Hmm.
think I
Watching
think
people type in AI prompts.
yeah, and when you're
Sorry.
when you're at a show or if you're recording, like I don't know if you record like because you have a YouTube channel too. I don't know how much you post, but I know in the past you've like shown your process and everything. I mean, people are going to be fascinated by that, and if you're one of the few people who can actually do that, I think in the age of AI and everything, because if you can't, it's almost like a math class. You had to show your work. But if you're doing it like digital, I mean, I guess you could show your work digitally too. You could do a
Oh
speed
yeah,
speed draw and stuff like that too. But I
yeah.
still think there's something to watching. I think things. I think it'll be more niche, but I think there will be a market for people wanting to watch people do stuff traditionally or have something that was created traditionally.
And
Yeah.
my art instructor, one of my art instructors, he there is something about problem solving that I'm not familiar with digitally, but I know it exists. It's the equivalent to what I'm about to say exists. But I know traditionally, my art instructor, he was a great painter, uh, did so much work, and he did not allow us to erase. It didn't matter what you did, you could not erase. And so we had to figure out, how can I transform this into what I'm trying to without the relying on erasing. And I know working digitally, any mistake you make is just so easy to just go back and fix and correct perspective and uh but there was something in the problem solving that taught me something about how to work no matter what happens in front of me, because very rarely from your mind to the medium you're working does it translate exactly.
Right.
Everything's always
Yeah.
better in my head. It's
Of
Yep.
always
course.
better in my head.
It's good to know
um
this when I look at your stuff. It looks so awesome. It's good to know that that's still the case for you as well.
well, it looks terrible to me because in my head I'm a better artist than I really
Yeah, I
am.
think
Yeah.
But
everybody.
oh yeah, it's probably something we all share. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if what I'm saying all that to say, if I learned art on that tool,
Mhm.
would I have learned that lesson? Uh, and it's just sort of like how with my kids, the same thing as washing dishes. Um, when they're young and they're learning, I make them wash dishes by hand. You will not use the dishwasher until you learn how to wash them by hand. Once you've learned, you can take a shortcut.
Yeah.
And I do think
Mhm.
that the learning still needs to take place. The teaching of traditional art still should take place. What medium people
Yeah.
choose to work in once they've learned those lessons is personal preference. It's just a tool. It's like a pencil or a pen. Technology advances. But I think the core lessons that working traditionally teaches probably still need to be learned.
Oh, 100%. I remember when I teach Photoshop classes, like one of the things that students were always really shocked to hear, because it was like illustration classes, was the fact that all the foundations matter. And they're like, what? And I'm
Oh,
like,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, when you're digitally painting, you got to think, what medium are you using? Are you using gouache? Are you using oil? Like if you mix it where it just looks like a blur, it's just going to look like digital boringness. Like,
Right.
whereas like good digital painters have a rough idea of like what they're painting with, so that
Right.
they start painting opaquely or they start painting transparently, and they start using the medium like what they're mimicking. And
Right.
it's similar with like a good photographer is going to have some time, doing traditional developing and stuff like that. And then when you use
Right.
Photoshop, you'll know what the shortcuts are for. And
Yeah.
and then you can cheat and break it a little bit. But the point
Yeah.
is, even what I'm doing right now, it's like I'm mimicking a gouache and airbrush. Like that's what I'm mimicking with my thing right now, and like that's the look I'm going for. So the way I approach it's going to be similar to the way I would, just way faster. And like
Right.
that's a huge. And yeah, what you're saying is like actually huge, because like digital is actually a lot easier to learn than the traditional skills, and digital is always going to change. Like Scott's using totally different programs alongside Photoshop that I don't use and I don't know, but it's like I don't feel super intimidated by those things, because again, like those core skills, those will follow you everywhere. That's really cool advice.
I
Also,
think
you doing it traditionally is just again, it's such a. I think there's a tactile thing, and there's mistakes that you like inevitably are going to make on a traditional piece. Like when I do comics traditionally, I always feel good about them because like there's little errors that make it human and kind of awesome. I don't know if that makes sense.
before you move on to a different topic, Josh, I want to jump back to what you were originally saying,
Yeah.
because I disagree. I don't think digital is easier to learn, because I started recently. So I mean, just 10 years ago is when I started learning to draw, and I started on a Wacom and I started digitally, and my work suffered horribly until I taught myself how to do it traditionally. And then
Yeah.
once I started doing it traditionally, then digitally was unlocked. And so
Yep.
after you have the foundation of traditional, you can unlock digitally really easily, I think.
Yeah.
But it's interesting when you look at all of the software, and this isn't just for art, this is for everything. Computers in general are trying to mimic what we have been doing for hundreds of years. Like that's every brush, every tool, every mouse click, everything. They're trying to say this one is going to make pixels that kind of use like the nib, or this one is going to make pixels that kind of use the brush. Like everything is based on something that, I mean, even to the point where kids in college today, it's like you've never actually even held the thing that save button is based on. Like you don't even know, like that's an inkwell. That's what that is. That's a stamp. That's a brush. That's a pointer. That's a floppy disk. Like
Yeah.
these are all things that they've never experienced, but
Sure.
but it makes more
Icon.
sense on what the tool is trying to do if you've done it on paper, if you've done it on canvas,
Yeah.
if you've done it
Yep.
with pigment.
Like if you've never spilled ink on something accidentally and it turned out to look awesome and you turned it into something, I don't know if you're really arting correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Another thing too, it goes beyond just like I said, photography. The other thing where what Corey's saying applies is like with typography. As an illustrator, I sucked so bad at type until I started doing comics and started playing with hand lettering, and then started looking into like the structure of type and the structure of the typography itself, and suddenly it made sense why, like, when you're in college and you take a type class, they make you hand do typography even to this day. because like once you start thinking about the structural components and like, you know, the letterpress and all of the history of typography, then what you're doing makes like 20,000 times more sense when you're doing it digitally. Whereas if you're just using a font, it's like you're not going to understand the kerning isn't always perfect. You know, you're not going to understand like the aesthetics and what you're working with. Having an idea of the structure, it's like yeah, that's huge. And again, that's the part that like once you have that, any program I think will kind of be able to unlock itself if you know, dedicate your time. But if you don't have that traditional stuff, man, you're just, you know, at best going to be making digital mush, you know, in my opinion. I don't know. Yeah.
But I'm still jealous of you guys. It looks so cool, and it saves so much time.
You could pick it up. You could pick it up so fast.
Yeah. Yeah.
honestly, if you got a Wacom and Photoshop or Clip Studio or Sketchbook Pro or something, you'd
I
be.
have a question for you.
Yeah.
So you guys know better than I. So for a newbie, a beginner like me, and this will probably be applicable to people listening and watching, if I want to make that transition, what do you suggest the best one? I know there are Wacom tablets that are just the pads that don't have screens, or would you recommend the one with the screen so you can see what you? Okay.
Yeah,
Josh and I are gonna disagree on this, but I think Scott and I are on the same page.
Yeah, because it doesn't have to be a Wacom tablet. Because I mean, if you want to spring for the money for that, that's fine. But there's so many now. I mean, it used to be it was Wacom or nothing or Wacom.
How much How much do they cost on average?
You're looking at like $1,200 for like a 22-inch. It gets
no wonder I never got into digital. That's
Wacom,
but yeah, like an XP pen or a Huion or something like that. You're actually looking at what is that, Scott? Like $300-400?
Yeah, I bought I think a 16-inch Huion that I could take that's kind of more mobile, and I think I paid $600 for that. And I think it's sort of a larger one, but you can get smaller ones. But
I'll tell you.
You know what? I'll just say $50. $50 for what I'm having.
Yeah, but you have the hand-eye disconnect. I know the parallax bugs you, Eric. I will tell you something. I'll give you a contact off air. I bet you could get sponsored.
Oh, that's
yeah. Because I just called them up and I said, hey, I want to do something. Let's do it. And they gave me the one I'm using now.
I'm so bad.
That's true.
I'll tell you that somebody sent me one, like a bamboo tablet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Probably about 5 years ago, and I never opened the box.
Those are like $50 though. Like you could get a bamboo for you could pick up a bamboo for like 20 used, you know. Yeah.
I think I probably gave or donated it or something.
But I think you could call them up and say, hey, professional comic book artist, worked on these properties. Let's do something together. And then you do one or two videos of you drawing some recognizable thing, and they'll comp you a machine, and they last for like a decade.
Oh wow! Well, one of my I wouldn't say mentors. Well, I guess he taught me a lot in comics. Ken Lashley does a lot of work for DC and Marvel. And when I first showed him my portfolio at San Diego years ago, he didn't tear it apart, but he was not shy about letting me know what I needed to work on. But I've kept in contact with him loosely over the years, and probably more so early on, not so much lately. But I used to email him or ask him for advice. I even Skyped him. If people remember what Skype was, I used Skype to talk to him sometime. And one time I Skyped him because I was trying to get work doing Batman, and he knew the people in the Batman offices. So he was telling me, hey, make sure when you do your Batman page, just put this in there, put that in there. And I was like, what are you doing right now? And he said, I am sitting in an office. I don't know where they sent him to. He's like, but they basically paid me, DC paid me to come here and learn to do digital art. He was sitting in some office for like Wacom, like sitting there drawing, and they paid him money to learn it. And I think he works digitally now on top of traditionally. But yeah, if there are opportunities out there, if you're doing traditional work and if you're doing work for, that gets visibility to be given the products, to be sponsored. Apparently they'll pay you money. I guess if you use that skill to do like DC shows, they'll like pay for you to learn it. I don't know, but I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I think you could, and it would, because I mean, you need to know like 5 things. There's 10,000 things to know, but if you know 5 things, you can do what you're doing, and it would look incredible.
I've got another question for you guys. Have you ever worked on something that you really it was chugging along, you liked it, and there have been some kind of accidental deletion or not saving or something that terrifies me
I'm a little, I mean,
you could dump a whole thing of ink on your paper too,
or your kid could break into your studio and color on a half-drawn page with crayon.
House fire,
But I will tell you one habit that I would get into if you go digital is reach a level of paranoia where you expect that to happen. Like I will describe.
You Command S like every 5 minutes.
I'll describe a level of paranoia that I think will put most people to shame here. But I have offsite at my it's not a bank. What do you call those? Credit union. At my credit union, I've got a box that I pay $40 a year for, and 2 or 3 times a month I will back up all the artwork that I made onto like a drive, and I'll go swap it out at that box, save it to the cloud, and save it in 2 different places on 2 different drives here. And so like everything I do has multiple. I mean, actually, Josh and I were talking about this. I've almost died so many times that I'm really, really into like multiple redundancies on safety, right? And so like, if I'm wearing a harness, I want to make sure that harness has like redundant safety features. If I'm rock climbing, if I'm canoeing or whatever.
And for me, it's just I don't rock climb or do anything.
You just don't go outside.
Yeah,
but like,
exactly.
It's the same. It's the same thing with my files. I'll pencil. When I do work traditionally, I'll pencil digitally and print it out, and I print out 2 or 3 pages, so that I'm not inking over like original pencils, and if I screwed up early, I can do that kind of thing, and I don't have to light box it or whatever. It's kind of a similar thing where, you could have your file, but lately, especially with Adobe, if something starts to act funky, you've got some time to like. You've got a couple of minutes to save it in a couple places, and if it crashes, there is a cached version of that file, kind of a ghost file somewhere hidden on your hard drive, and the next time you open up the software, it'll go get that. And so
sometimes don't rely on it.
Not always.
Sometimes
that is really nice, because what'll happen is like your Adobe will crash and you'll reboot it, and it'll say it'll have the file, and it's pretty close to what you were just working on. But what does it say on it? Like it's got a little recovered.
Yeah.
And then usually if it looks like what I want, then I'll just take that recovered file and I'll save it as whatever. I'll save it as whatever the original file is. And so that wasn't always the case, but they're getting better at that type of thing.
Yeah, and you might lose 20 minutes, of work, which sucks. But
But a commonplace thing to have set up that I think would be like a bare minimum, maybe you don't need like a security box or whatever, but you definitely want some cloud storage. So you want a cloud redundancy. You want a physical hard drive redundancy too. So like you have a backup hard drive, and then you also want a backup in the cloud. I would say that's probably like the minimal redundancy. If you're doing this for a living, like, right now I'm working on a book that's like 120 something page, or it's going to be 200 pages. And if I didn't have a backup of that thing, and like, let's say a year from now, my computer dies, like, what am I going to tell my publisher, who's been waiting for over a year for a book? It's like, you're screwed if you're not backing stuff up. Yeah. So yeah, I mean,
I've got original art on the walls, and I've got my flat file back here. And last year my washing machine flooded, and luckily it didn't touch any paper. But I mean, I had to tear my entire studio apart. All the drywall from 2 or 3 feet up from the floor had to go because it all got wet. So luckily my stuff was hanging up a little bit higher, but like,
right.
Physical and digital, you run that risk.
Right.
but yeah, that happens sometimes. I think maybe I'm wrong, but I think it happens a little bit more on vector stuff than raster stuff. And so if you're working in like Illustrator, InDesign, it's a little bit more common than if you're working in Photoshop or Sketchbook or Clip Studio. So
Yeah. Even though I would recommend, and I'm not saying, Eric, that you even need to go digital, because it seems like you're doing just fine traditionally.
I
And it's
also
not
have not, the last 3 minutes. I didn't understand any. I don't use clouds
Yeah,
except the ones that rain on me outside.
Right. Yeah. But what I would, if you ever do decide, I would highly recommend Clip Studio Paint, because it is designed for comic book artists, and drawing in it is just so much better than like drawing in Photoshop or anything like that. But
right, I think for perspective, it would be great, because I used to hate gridding everything out and like drawing like buildings upon building, window and window. And it's great, you're still doing it, but there's those guidelines, that you don't. I always wish that I had that right there in front of me. But
yeah, I created a whole digital product that has like just facades, like fronts of buildings, where you can take and you can skew them, so you could build whole cities out of it, and you can populate your backgrounds and stuff like that.
By the time I learned how to do what you said, I could have just drawn it. Like, I don't know.
Well, that's the thing, and that's why it took me so long, because I had been doing, I've been using Photoshop and stuff, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna learn Clip Studio Paint, because I hear it's great for comics, and I kept putting it off because of that, because the learning curve, I could just do it by hand or whatever. By the time I get around to learning it, and then eventually I just said, okay, I'm gonna learn it. And then once you get over that, it will take a little while to learn it, but once you get over that, then it's like, okay, now it's going to start saving me time. But up until then, it's like I could do it faster, by hand. So it's
and it's tough when you're already on deadline on stuff. Like, I like Scott and Corey both use Clip Studio a lot, and like other, like iPad based things. And even at like the National Cartoonist Society, like there was like this year, a couple years back, where all the traditional guys switched to iPad Pros, and I'm seeing them work really quick. And I'm like, even with my digital stuff, it's like I just don't have the time to like learn a new program, because I'm doing everything in this program. So it's like one of those, like, you'll learn by necessity. Like, the point being, you're pretty flooded with work, Eric, so I don't think you have a need to learn it.
I mean,
and if that need comes up, you'll figure it out.
It could speed some things up. I think it would be a loss to the world in general if you went digital, just because I love traditional.
It does help revising traditional.
Yeah,
like I do my
comics.
I do my comics like traditionally inked, but if I have my publishers like go, oh, can you change this thing on this character on this panel? It's like 30 minutes later, I have a totally new character on there.
Yeah, and you don't need to cut it out of paper and paste up and stuff like that.
And I will
say, as somebody who loves traditional, I've been mostly digital for a couple of years, just because it is so much faster.
Yeah.
And there's also there's something I do like about the collaborative process. So like I'm kind of afraid, like, if I could digitally ink my own stuff, I probably would. But when I do that, I miss out like those 20 inkers that I talked about. I'm not giving them work. Or there have been times when one of my favorite inkers, his name is Jeremy Clark, or even Mikey Babinski. He was one of my main inkers for the longest. He always brought something to the table. He always enhanced the pencils in a way I'd have never thought of.
Yeah.
And I think there's a part of me that if I did the professional work, like I still want to learn it. I think I'll kind of like learn it in my like spare time, just for fun, to see how I like it. But working professionally, I do kind of fear that I would be less collaborative. Here's an example. When I was doing the very first issue of the Last Ronin, back when that came out, there was a couple of, so like IDW was cool with it, but then when it got to Nickelodeon didn't like the blood that was on the sword. And so I was smart, because I knew Nickelodeon might say something. So what I did is I drew the sword, then I scanned it, and I saved it, and I put it to the side, and then I painted traditionally, I did levels of acrylic of painting blood on that sword, and I sent it to them. When they said no, I just sent them the other one, and they were like, "This is good." But now, because it was a black and white cover, we want that pop of red. They asked for the pop of red, but I'm like, you told me I can't do blood, and it's Ronin, so his mask is black. Where am I supposed to magically put this red? And I had to call three colorists. I had to email at 0 hour. Like we had like another day to get this thing in to simply change the background to red.
Yeah,
which is a quick, easy fix, and he did it. And I'm like, how much do I owe you? It must have been so difficult. He's like, dude, it was one click.
Yeah.
I drew this and clicked, and it was done. So there are benefits, I'm always going to depend on someone, to do something I don't know how to do. But I don't always see that as a negative. It's a negative sometimes. It's a positive sometimes. When you're collaborative, it can be positive. But also, if you just need to make a simple change that artist next to you knows how to make very easily, who do you think is going to get more work and faster and hired? A lot of times when I tell them, look, I need to let you know, I'm not a triple threat, so I don't pencil, ink, and color. I can pencil and ink, and if I color, I dare call myself a colorist because I don't consider what I do coloring very well. But I could say, okay, maybe I'm a triple threat. But nowadays, that term doesn't even mean as much because there's another thing out there digitally where you can do all those things. And so you used to be able to boast like, I'm a triple threat. That I have a guy who can not only do that, but he can digitally letter it. He can color his own, so he can do all that. And it becomes more of an auteur type of approach because you're controlling everything, which when I'm doing my creator-owned stuff, I love it. But there are times, I'll be honest with you guys, I'll pencil something very loosely, and I will send it to the inker, and I'll be like, I have no vision for this spot. I don't really care. Just do what you want. And I love the ability to do that. They're like, is this supposed to, I got a text from the inker, and he's like, hey, is this supposed to be feathering, cross hatching, spot black? It's kind of, I'm like, all of the above, whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever you think it is.
I think here's what I would recommend. If you wanted to speed some stuff up, I would still do all of the core you stuff traditionally, right? All the stuff that is your secret sauce and everything. But like, I think in the rough stage, digital pencils on roughs is a game changer, because if you don't like the arm where it is, you just select it and you can move it. Or if you drew the head a little bit too big, you can just select it and you can shrink it down. You know what I mean? Like or if you don't, and so you can do like comps, thumbnails, roughs, do all that digitally, and then you could pencil traditionally after you figure all that out. Right. And then you'd still have the original artwork. You would still have that personal touch. You still have that collaboration. And that's what I would do, is I would still, because I don't know, I think the robots are coming and they're going to F everything up, and I hate everything about that situation. And so I'm never going to like push somebody who is good at traditional into digital. But if you wanted to do some of that stuff, and then you could learn a little bit on the back end of things that would help just make those little minor changes. Like Josh was saying, like you finish the piece, you like it, they want a different hand position, they want a different weapon in his arm or whatever. Like you could go in, select, fix, ink, blah blah, spit it out, and just on the beginning and the end of that process, you could go a little bit digital, and that's where you're probably going to get the most time savings anyway. And the kind of the iterative process in those roughs and the iterative process with the editors at the end, you could save some time. But I would encourage you not to go digital, just because I don't know. I think it sets people apart.
And I think you could use that as a crutch too, with it, because you can do all that stuff. Because I mean, it you tend to rely on that, whereas you have to be more skillful if you don't have the ability to move an arm around or do whatever.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of like driving stick versus driving manual. Like it's always going to be an advantage to also know stick.
True. That's true. So when you all learned Did you learn because another artist kind of showed you? Did you try sit down with it on your own and try to learn, or did you do a class? I mean, what do you recommend?
I just learned by brute force because I'm just a hack at everything. So I just go in there and I'm too stupid to know that I shouldn't be doing it that way until I figure it out.
Currently, I learned via YouTube University, just watching YouTube videos.
Oh,
But I've been doing, I mean, I went to school for commercial art, so a little different that you were kind of more fine art.
right,
I went to
right.
school, I was interested in typography and logos and stuff like that, also illustration. But at the time, I didn't know that there was a difference. I
Right.
started taking fine art classes, and I'm showing my painting and color theory instructor my portfolio, and there's like logo designs and stuff because I grew up with I mean I would look at the comic covers, but I also love the mastheads and all that kind of stuff. And he says it looks like you're more interested in like commercial art, so I ended up switching to another school, and and so I learned all that stuff, typography and everything, but I didn't know that there was a difference between graphic design and illustration, to the point where
Right.
I just thought you do both, and everyone could do both. But then I got to the point where I noticed there were brilliant illustrators, awesome illustrators that couldn't design a logo, and to me it was
Right.
like, oh, wow, so these are two totally separate things.
Yeah.
And I'm fortunate enough that I can do both, to some degree pretty well. But that's kind of where, so I mean, I was there kind of when they were first introducing like computers into, there's a computer lab, and working in like Photoshop 2, or even before Illustrator, there was Aldous Freehand and all this stuff. So, I mean, I learned a little bit of that. I've been doing that kind of stuff for a while, so I can't say exactly. Some of it I learned in school, but like right now, for instance, with like editing, I'm learning Premiere Pro. I'm doing all my videos in Adobe Premiere Pro. And I mean, I'll get to a point where like, okay, I don't know how to do this. So I just go to YouTube. I find the shortest video that shows me how to make that, and I watch it. I'm like, okay, that's how I do it. And then I do it. And then I'll forget how to do it, and I'll have to look the same video up. And eventually, after I do that about 4 times, then I'll remember how to do it. So that's kind of how I learned how to do stuff.
Yeah. Like for me, I learned Photoshop. Like there was one class, like we were just starting to do the transition to having a digital art class, and so there was one class where we went over the basics of Photoshop and like very briefly touched on Illustrator. And I kind of sucked on Illustrator. I understood Photoshop pretty well because my buddy Rick Reese taught that class at the time, and he had done colors for like Bongo. And so like it was cool because I learned a bunch of comics stuff, which was cool because it was an illustration program. But then it's like they required us to have like a lot of classes in typography and design as well in the illustration program. And so it was kind of cool because I got inundated with it. But I also just kind of lied at my first for my first junior illustrator position. I worked for like an educational company, and they required Adobe Illustrator, and I didn't, but I just said I did. And then I learned on the job by asking a bunch of people, and then forcing myself to like do shortcuts instead of clicking the icons. And I was really slow for about like 2 weeks, and then picked it up pretty quickly. So it's a lot of it is like stuff you can self-teach, and once you
Right.
unlock one, especially with Adobe, like one of the great things about Adobe that I will still say is great to their credit is all of the programs kind of have a similar logic. So once you've unlocked one program, the other programs all kind of unlock equally. And I didn't even realize that till Corey had gotten me into After Effects, which does animation and stuff like that. And he mentioned that it's a lot like Illustrator. And then I was playing with it, and I was like, oh, this is like GarageBand mixed with Illustrator. It's just like, so once you kind of unlock like one platform, it's kind of like painting, right? Like if you learn oil painting, then taking oil painting logic and applying it to like acrylic isn't that big of a deal. It's like once you've unlocked one medium, it kind of allows you to start learning other mediums,
Right. You guys both, you and Scott both mentioned something that I really want to highlight is that, how you were saying that you didn't realize there was such a difference between the commercial art world and just the fine arts, and then you mentioned kind of a similar thing with, just not these are two different worlds. And not only I wouldn't feel too bad for you not knowing the difference, but one of the main bodies that does not know the difference are a lot of time the customers, and they come
Right.
I'll do something, an action scene or something in the book, and they'll go, "Hey, that's great. Can you design my coffee shop logo?"
Yeah.
And I'm like, and they really don't get that
Yeah.
there's a huge difference in the learning curve.
Yeah.
Now, in college, I took the principles of design. I did start to learn those things, but by no means is that equal. It's so bad that when I was younger, I went to a newspaper because I wanted to be the cartoonist and do like the Sunday, like some of the little political cartoons, because I didn't know what else to use my art for. So I went to the newspaper, and they already had someone to do that, but they offered me a job working with doing the layouts. The newspaper. So I was placing the ads and all these things. I had no clue what I was doing. I didn't necessarily lie, like you mentioned. Kind of said I could do more than I can. They assumed that because I could do one, it must be automatic that you can do the other. And I had to learn on the job, doing all the placement, everything for the font, like everything.
Yep.
And this was back when the iMac was, I don't know if you guys remember back when they had the bulbous clear.
Oh yeah,
I remember that.
That was like the industry standard. That was like the industry standard for the newspaper world when that first came out.
What was that? That wasn't even the G5. That was like a generation before that. I can't even remember.
It's where they all came in. Where they all came in different flavors, right?
Yeah.
Oh man.
It was right before the volleyball Macs.
Yep.
Where they all
volleyball Mac.
The volleyball Mac. Oh man, it's like they had this just arm sticking out of a white ball, and the white ball was the computer, and the arm came out to hold the screen. They didn't last very long because they were ugly and super heavy.
No, and
I was really poor then, and I bought an eMac because that was the first iMac, and the eMac was like this educational version. And it weighed 63 pounds. And I remember I put that on an ironing board in my apartment. And it was because that's the only thing I had. And I was like, anyway, that was back in the day, man.
That's crazy. Like, Eric, we probably started around the same time on Macs too, because like that was about, like, I think the first Mac that I purchased was the G5 iMac, which was like one generation after what you're talking about. So it was like a year after. It was the big white cube. But that's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm gonna pull up
layout's a rough job, man.
Mac for Josh.
How long did you do layout?
I did that about a year, but then also I had another job also, because with layouts, you also do all the advertising placements. So that position, so all of the businesses would call me, pay for ads. I'd have to figure out how big of an ad they can have. So it was almost kind of two jobs in one. Mm-hmm. And I didn't go there for that at all. I just wanted to draw cartoons.
Yep.
And so that probably subconsciously did chase me away from working digitally, because I went there to do something traditional, something I understood, and they kind of forced this thing on me. I didn't understand. I didn't have to take the job, but I needed money. But they dumped me in this office, gave me my own office and everything. Other people were in cubicles. I felt so guilty. I had imposter syndrome that entire time. I'd rolled my chair out and asked people how to do. Look, the navigation between Windows was different than the operating system and Safari and all that stuff on Mac. Yeah. I didn't even know how to save a file or right click. It was just all confusing to me. I mean, originally when I started working with computers, when I took typing, it was with typewriters. Yep. And then there was one computer in the school, one, and people only used it to play Oregon Trail And where
Yep.
in the world is Carmen San Diego?
Yep.
Like I didn't know that those DOS computers could do anything else.
Yep.
And so the very next time I had to use one for work, it was on an iMac. Yeah, I had a laptop to like type papers and all that stuff for in college, but yeah, that was too much too fast.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's a funny. I feel like maybe we're all like in the last generations that might even be able to relate to that. Like,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, because I was actually talking about that the other day that we learned typing on, like, I think it was word processors. They weren't computers, but they were word processors, and like
We didn't even have corrective when corrective tape came out.
Yeah.
Like right after we lost our minds.
Yeah, that was like the coolest thing about the word processors
Oh,
was these
man.
ones had like it had little white correction fluid that you could just hit the little correct thing and it
Yeah.
would go back a few spaces and go like.
And you know what's
spray it on
interesting about the conversation that we're having about digital art and
Yeah.
progression to digital is this is probably the same conversation that typists had
Mhm.
about the computers and word processors and
Yep.
losing the physical, being able to push the ribbons in and to slide everything. Yeah, there's probably the same conversation. And what's sad, maybe, is that now nobody really remembers. There's still like an antique market. You know,
Yeah.
even my youngest daughter wanted a typewriter for Christmas last year.
Yeah, I don't know
Really?
anyone who likes
Interesting.
vintage typewriters.
Yeah, well, there's a whole
Sorry.
industry surrounding it, but if they break,
I
the
own
part, it's a lot to get.
I
them
own
fixed.
7 vintage typewriters.
Oh,
Really?
okay.
Yeah.
Should have called you then.
I just had them for the look. I've got a couple that still work, but I wouldn't know how to fix it if it broke.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I think
yeah.
I think that, like, on this note, though, this kind of highlights the niceness of you being able to work traditionally, because I think that, like, for instance, like, there are artisanal printers that exist in Los Angeles that do letterpress. And because of that, because of the rarity of it, they actually have quite a lot of business. Because letterpress still has like this really beautiful look to it when it's done,
Right.
and hardly anyone does it. Hardly anyone knows how to do it anymore, and so there's like a whole industry of it. I think the point being, like, if you're like doing what you said at the beginning of this, where you're doing everything to your fullest and to the best of your ability, even when you're doing traditional, like even hand lettering is like a huge thing now
Oh yeah.
in design. And that's partially in reaction to just all the digital lettering. Because like then when you see beautiful hand lettering, it's like, what is this? People almost forget,
But ultimately, being able to do both is your most advantageous position.
Yeah.
Being able to speak to both worlds will definitely open up the maximum number of doors, possibilities, learning opportunities, and so on. But I think wherever you are artistically, if you're still drawing with pencil and a pad or working with pens, I mean, I remember the same nervousness about transitioning to learn how to use nibs and to ink and using an inkwell versus the pencil, which I could control and erase. Any learning curve as you advance in your art, whatever. I don't think you'll know the tool that best suits you until you explore and you find it. And I'm nervous to kind of explore the digital frontier, but I've locked into the traditional. I feel so strongly that that's my home. But it doesn't mean that it's true. I could learn something that I like more. But I do always feel like I'll prefer to work traditionally for publication.
Mhm.
I'll prefer, obviously, working for fans and stuff. I mean, drawing at cons, there's really no way to duplicate that except to sit down and pull out a piece of paper and draw for them. I'm sure you can send them an email, a file of what you draw digitally, but I feel like I prefer that, but I am curious to learn. Like Corey said, it seems so interesting to learn, but I still recognize the roots of what I'm doing, and I love those roots, and I probably stick with doing that professionally until there's no room left, and that nobody wants that anymore.
I think that's a good place to end it, and we're getting closer to our hour and a half. So, if there's any other point that anyone wants to make on this topic, other than that, let's start going around the room and wrapping things up and tell everyone where to find.
I just want to say I'm glad it ended there, because had Eric come on here to talk about how good traditional art is, and then we just convinced him to go digital, that would suck.
No, I didn't want. That wasn't the goal. So.
No, I know.
I wanted to throw in there too, just to like kind of back up the value of what Eric's doing. My favorite artist, my favorite cartoonist, I always mention him, is Chris Ware. And part of why Chris Ware is so amazing to me is the fact that he's doing it all with with traditional inks. And so when you look at his work, it looks like just a single line weight illustration done in vector. And it's only when you realize like that's all done with like a liner pen and like dip ink and quill and like all these beautiful geometric shapes that are done traditionally. It's like that to me unlocks the beauty of Chris Ware, and also those little moments where you see like the end of the line like split from the tines of the ink and stuff. Like that kind of stuff is never I don't think that's ever going to go out of style. So I think it's cool, Eric, that you're able to do that. And I also find it shocking what you're able to pull off with marker. It's just incredible. Yeah.
I will also say, whenever I have like a real experience with the comic book, I like want to own a page, right? And so I've had several times where I'm like, this was like a moving book. Like the art was incredible and the writing was good. And I've reached out to the artist to say, hey, do you have any of these pages for sale? And a couple times they're like, no, dude, it's all digital. And it's like such a loss. It's like, it's like, I wanted, like, I have pages on my wall that like pieces of my like philosophy are based on, or moments, you know, in my character arc. My personality is built on the way I thought about specific things at that time changed because I read that book, and I have a physical artifact that a human being touched, that an artist had an experience with, and you will never get that digitally.
Yeah.
And so I think that is, for me, one of the most important things is that I have, you know, I've got Sean Gordon Murphy, I've got Ryan Otley, I've got Sean Crystal, I've got some real pages of people that I've interacted with, and that I've read their stuff, and it will always be a part of my home. It's in my studio, and I've got prints of like original pages, and it's different. It's just different. There's no texture to that page. There's no whiteout. There's no blue line.
Eric, can I ask you one question? I know we're about to wrap, but one question. I don't want to open a huge can of worms, but I do a lot of traditional work, like with my own personal comics and stuff, but I have yet to really sell original pages. And part of it's like the hoarder in me, because I have a graphic novel. It's like 120 something pages, all hand done. And having them all feels like, haha, I've got all of them. But I have thought about selling originals, and I've always hesitated. I was going to ask, when you finish these pages, how do you go about listing the originals for sale? Just out of a super selfish reason, I'm kind of curious about that.
Oh, I understand. I have a habit of, I don't keep anything. I don't own one physical piece of my own artwork, because my goal is to try to sell that artwork.
Yeah. Even your creator-owned projects.
Let me take that back. I have a few of those pages left, but most of them have sold.
Okay.
And I didn't list them. Honestly, I didn't list them. So the way that's worked for me is, typically after I draw something, I post it online or whatever, social media, Instagram, all that. I mean, within a couple of minutes or same day, typically there are some interested parties, and I'll end up selling to one of them within a day or two and shipping it out in a couple of days. With the pages, they sell. They don't. I mean, pages are hard to sell.
Yeah.
Comic industry wide, doesn't matter who you are.
Yeah.
So and pages don't sell for as much as covers.
Yeah.
So that's why a lot of guys want to do covers, because they can make more money. But the way it works for me is that they will come to my table to see something that I'm drawing for somebody else, or to buy, a live sketch or a sketch cover. But then that stuff runs out, and you throw open your portfolio and say, look, I've got these things. These are real pages from a comic, and they may not be interested because they've not read the comic before. Then you start talking them up and say, hey, look, here's the comic that comes from. And a lot of times they'll start, for me, they've started like, they've bought it, they'll like flip through it in the show, and within 20 or 30 minutes, they're back at the table and they're like, ooh, let me buy this page.
That's awesome.
So yeah, I mean, I think trying to pawn your pages off for someone really early on, especially if you create your own stuff, is tough. But it's about giving them value. So I'll say, hey, you want me to do this Venom thing for you? I'll draw this Venom for you. But if you're interested, I will knock off 30% from this page to this book that came with it, or whatever. And trying to give them value, give them something that they may not know that they want, or feel like they can. A lot of people don't buy them because they assume they cannot afford them.
Yeah.
Just let them know, look, this is just going to sit in this portfolio and collect dust.
Yep.
If you want to give it a home and frame it, we can make it happen. So I don't really have a huge digital footprint, but for me, what's worked is just posting it online and just telling people, hey, if you're interested, instant message me. If you don't say that in the message, they will assume either it's sold, it's gone, it's digital. You got to tell them, look, this is up for grabs. If you want it, hit me up, but hurry, because it might be gone.
I like that.
It might not be, but people do respond to that in my experience.
Awesome. That's cool to hear.
Yeah.
Sorry for taking so long.
No, that's great stuff. That's great stuff. All right, so let's again work around the room. So this time we'll start with Eric. So Eric, where can everyone find your stuff if they want to check you out, including you can mention the appearance at Surprise coming up and everything.
Sure. You can just go to erichensonart.com. On social media platforms like Facebook, Instagram, I think Twitter or X or whatever it's called now, as well. And you can come out if you're in the Arizona area, or if you're not and you just want to take a trip somewhere, take it to Surprise Comics September 16th. From 10 to 5, Scott will be there. From 10 to 1, I will be there at minimum, maybe longer, doing signings, giving away prints for people who buy $20 or more. And it's a Batman, of course, and just come on out and celebrate the Dark Knight.
Yeah, awesome. All right, Corey, what about you?
You can check my stuff out at CoreyKerr.com. Like I said, I'll be launching a new series soon that will be similar but completely different than the one that I've been working on for the last year.
Does that have anything to do with what you're working on now?
Yeah, great hand.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, it is. This is going to be the first one in the series, but without giving too much away. It'll be similar style, probably some color this time, and different messaging. So
okay, all right.
So stick to go to CoreyKerr.com/email and get on the email newsletter so you don't miss out on that announcement when I decide to launch that.
Cool. All right, Josh.
So if you haven't yet, consider supporting indie comics and picking up my book, Jacob's Apartment, that is available through Graphic Mundi. And also consider picking up 2 stories, graphic novel about faith, mental illness, and it's all hand-done, hand-lettered, and hand-inked. And also, if you're curious what I've been working on right now, it's a kid's book that I've been doing a lot of live streams and stuff on my channel while doing spreads for these that my wife and I are collaborating on for a client. And so if you want to see how to do like little golden book style kids book art digitally with really simple tools, make sure you're subscribed to my YouTube channel. So, yeah.
Awesome. And as Eric mentioned earlier, I'll be at Surprise Comics on the 16th of this month. I'll be there from 10 to 5. If you happen to be in Arizona and Surprise specifically, or want to make the trek out, come see me. You can also find my books, my comic books, at my website at circworks.com. Young and the Dead. It's a kids versus zombie adventure story. kind of like Goonies meets Night of the Living Dead. Plus, I've got digital products for making comics, and I'm doing some cool stuff on my YouTube channel. I'm reverse engineering classic nostalgia from the 70s, 80s, and 90s and putting a unique spin on it. Check out that stuff. Or my series, Making Comics 101, the most comprehensive free course for making comics, and you'll find that, like I said, free on YouTube. Other than that, this show we do, the Artcasters, we do this show every single week. It's been kind of on some weird days and stuff recently. I think we're kind of getting back to doing it on Thursdays, but who knows? That could change. You never know. But we're trying to get back to sort of our regular routine. But anyway, in the show, it kind of fluctuates. It kind of bounces back and forth between Josh's channel and Corey's channel. And we've got a different guest every single week. Some weeks we don't have a guest. Some weeks it's just us. But all that is to say that it gets a little confusing. The channel it's going to be on, who the guest is, the time, the day, all that stuff. But if you don't want to be confused, the best way to remedy that is just to join our mailing list. We don't spam you or anything. All we do is, about 30 minutes before we go live, we send out a notification letting you guys know that we're about to go live, and then you will be in the know if you click on that. So, like I said, there's a link in the description of this video for that, and there's also a link to Eric's channel, or to Eric's website. Definitely, if you haven't, other than the thumbnail you see on this video, definitely check out his work because it's pretty awesome. So, all right, so we'll see everyone next week.
You guys, it's me from the future. End the show.